she did some more research and found out some more stories. Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So what I was suggesting to Ranjana is that she should do some more research and find out if there are some more stories written by her grandmother, because this is a very interesting collection. And when I read through the stories, I found that it's over a period of time. It's not that it was written in a year or 2 years or something. And why I say that is because things had changed, from story to story, including income. So there was one story in which this family was earning between 100 and 200 rupees a month, and they had a cook, they had a maid, and they had some odd job person. There's another story where they had somebody who had an income of 75,000. So you can in a year. So you can imagine, the range of the period in which these stories were written. But what I would really like to concentrate on in these stories is about the people. Okay, that's one segment that I would like to concentrate on. The book begins with the first story of one Leela Tai, the fashionable. Again, I think it's just a guess, but I would say that this would be probably in 1910 or something, around that time, when things were transforming, things were changing, and the passion that Leela Tai had was to wear Western clothes. And she was able to persuade her husband to go to a circus, both wearing Western clothes, but they were very conscious of the fact that they were wearing Western clothes and didn't want anybody to recognize them. Right? And they left their child with the maid. And after the circus was over, the maid couldn't find Leela Tai and her husband. So she went to one of these coaches, and who does she find over there? She finds her neighbors over there. And that's how the story came out, that Leela Tai was there in Western clothes with her husband. So, this was a kind of transformative period. There's another very good story, I think that's one of my favorites in this, which is look at both sides of a coin. Now, this is interesting because the central character in this is the father of a girl who is a widow, a young girl, very liberal. I'd just like to read a passage from that. The father is a very liberal person, but now this is what the girl's friend says. Ultimately they get married.
Page, please.
This is page 145 of the story. Now look at Kaka Sahib, that is Sarla's father. The Sarla is the young widow, as an example. He supports progress in all spheres. He wants all women, including widows, to be empowered through education. He rejects child marriage. He wants girls to be educated and older before marriage. He rejects traditions that dehumanize widows, including child widows. He supports the abolition of the practice of compelling a woman to have her hair shaved upon the death of her husband as a mark of lifelong widowhood. Sarla, your father is undoubtedly a reformer, but you also know very well that Kaka Sahib is completely opposed to widow remarriage. Isn't that the only reason, dearest Sarla, that left with no other option, we have to take this bold decision? So you had this person who was, very liberal against many of these things, child marriage, and the way the widows were treated. And there are several stories about the treatment of widows. Very pro-education for girls, wanted girls to get married at an older age, but when it came to his daughter, he didn't want her to get remarried only because she was a widow. and ultimately Prabhakar and this Sarla's uncle was supporting her and her friend Prabhakar, and ultimately they get married and they get the blessings of the father. So you have a completely different character in the stories. There's another story of a teenage or a child marriage story about a young girl who is in love with somebody else, but her parents tell her to get married to a particular person. So she tries, to make her husband happy. Her friend says that he's not going to get married. She tries to make her husband happy. She does all kinds of things. She even goes to the extent of, playing tennis with him, so that he would feel happy. So I really don't know when this tennis thing came about. Maybe in the 1920s. I don't know. I'm mentioning this because of the range, the years. But she obeyed her parents, got married, tried her best to make her husband happy, but for some reason her husband, just wouldn't take to it. And ultimately she died of sorrow. And when she died, her parents were with her, and she told them that, listen, I've been an obedient daughter, right? But this is how things pan out in life. Now the reason why this is important is because of the you couldn't question people, you couldn't question your parents. So if your parents said, and this is what the father or the mother said, that don't you think I know what's good for you? I know it's good for you to get married to this person, so when I say you get married to this person, you get married to this person. So she has no option but to get married, although she's in love with somebody else. So again, you have a range of characters. There are many of them. I just picked up 3 examples. The second, thing that I would like to focus on really is relationships, right? Now, one of the stories is incompatible or immature, where they are dealing with the stories about the relationship between the husband and the wife. Now, the way the husband treats the wife, is pretty bad, and ultimately she leaves the house. She says, "I've had enough," and goes to stay with her father. But look at the exchange. Yeah, one is that this Indutai was insulted by her husband in the presence of her friends. She did not say a word, but tears welled up in her eyes. She did not know much cooking and always had to ask for help, though eventually she always turned out the best possible arrangements. But Vinayak, that is her husband, never had a word of appreciation for her. She consoled herself that it was encouragement enough if he found nothing to criticize. And later on, she gets courage and she wants to speak about it. And she tells a friend who advises her, "Indutai, we can't let ourselves get upset each time these men say something to us. However clever we may be, we are only women after all. We have to bear the burden of their displeasure," reasoned Yamuna. Indu retorted, "As if women are some garbage to be shoved in the corner. I will not tolerate it. I will write to Baba tomorrow. I cannot bear this injustice anymore." So you have this, idea of empowerment coming. I mean, there are stories about education and all that, but then again, empowerment, and ultimately she leaves the home. That's when her husband realizes that, listen, what kind of a house do I have? Right? What I need is a homemaker, somebody who's here in the house. And then, of course, she comes back. She was hoping that he would call her back, but he didn't. But anyway, she came back, and then they lived happily ever after, so to speak. There is another story about an educated son-in-law. All right, he's educated, but still treats his wife like garbage in a sense. So you have this, transformation that is going on around that time. Maybe some of these stories may have been written around the same time about women's empowerment. Lakshmi Bai was actively involved in some of these social reform movements, and maybe that's the reason that she wrote about this. But you had this educated son-in-law who didn't, treat his wife very well, even though she was educated. So you had these, dynamics between the family, the mother-in-law, the son, or the husband, and the treatment of women. Another story that deals with this is about the coincidence, about how the mother-in-law treats her daughter-in-law. Very nice when her son is around, right? But the moment the son goes out of the house, why aren't you doing this? You're just hanging around doing nothing, reading books of all the things, right? You should be doing some work. So these relationships have also come out quite well. Now again, you have to see this in the light of the people that are being written about. You have to see this in the light of the relationships between various people, and extrapolate it with the age, all right, which I think should be maybe from 1910 to 1920, maybe a little earlier, maybe a little later, but that's how it is. The third thing, which I think runs through all the story, all the stories are events that have been occurring. Of course, teenage and child marriage is something which is, everybody in the story has got married at an early age. Some at the age of 5, some at the age of 8. When you have liberal parents, they say, all right, you can go to school, and then maybe when you're in class 10, 14-year-old, one girl, 14-year-old in class 10, time to get married. Okay, and now marriages, it's not that you get engaged and all that. Within 15 days, you get married, right? And you get married to the person that I want you to get married to. There is a story of one of these ladies who is slightly older but comes from a poor family, right? She's the only one who gets married at a comparatively later age. And she gets married to somebody who is a wealthy person. And the option was, according to the parents, either you stay unmarried or you get married to whoever comes. And this person came. Of course, they had a problem later on, but that was the condition of women. So if you don't have money, if you're not wealthy, sorry, you've got to remain unmarried for the rest of your life, or get married to whoever is there. Widow remarriage, I think that is something which, the status of widows has come out, very starkly in this.